Welcome back to another art challenge. Another week of challenging my friend Joanna to create an art piece at random. So of course we rolled the art dice again, and our fate was to create an abstract watercolor blue mountain, which means that I had to use watercolor paints for the first time in my life.
Whoa!
Let's see how we did. But first, let's check out Joanna's creative process for creating abstract watercolor mountains.
My process started with thinking about the medium, using watercolor, knowing that I could get an abstract feel just by the nature of how I work with the watercolor. Working in heavy applications of water, letting the pigment bloom and move as the water swells up the paper and manipulates the shape of the paper. And because we had 2 hours to do this, I also had to introduce my blow dryer, and that became a very useful tool in being able to move the pigment around in the water and get it to dry where I wanted it to dry, or just let the water take it where it wanted to go. So it was a bit of control and release in this piece, which I feel is where most of the abstract nature of this composition came from, is in the use of materials and medium and tools in moving the color around. But thinking about mountains, which is a representational subject, how to think about that abstractly, really wanted to start with just forms. Organic, rounded forms, overlapping, undulating throughout the composition. And there was a part where I feel like I got a little crowded, and it got too flat. And I wanted to bring a little bit more perspective, depth of field back in, contrast. And so I brought in one of my favorite colors, Prussian blue. It's one of my favorite gouache colors. It is rich, it is deep, it is, to me, the essence of blue. I love that color, and it, I think, was perfect to bring that punch of deep blue into this. Really setting off a bit of the yellow I brought in as well. And I had a lot of fun playing with color and form and the nature of watercolor, being able to kind of push and pull the pigment around on the paper, adjusting the edges of mountains, adjusting the edge of the composition and the raggedness of some of the shapes of the forms. I got a little more meticulous with this than I originally intended I would. Thinking abstract, I originally wanted to come to this with a sense of just freedom, and letting almost a very minimalistic approach to what mountains could be. And in the end, I spent most of the time pushing and pulling material, which I did not intend to do. But in the moment, it just felt like that is where it was taking me, where the process itself was taking me. And I really just trusted the process this time.
This is my first time actually specifically using watercolor paints. One of the only things that I really know about watercolor is how difficult it can be, in the fact that when you use too much water, it'll bloom a lot. But I imagined it would be a little bit more difficult with watercolors to maintain a strong contrast between colors. Because of my inexperience with it, I really wanted to get to know how to use it better, so I was very gentle with it at first, and I was more interested in getting to know the medium rather than making it really abstract, because then I don't know that I would have learned as much during this process. The mountainscape that I choose to create is actually based on a photograph that I took in Colorado when my sister used to live there. So remembering this view and being there several years ago really brought back some nostalgia. This time I wanted to keep the entire composition blue, so I really only stuck to using 2 different blues, one to be more of a mid-tone and one to be more of a dark blue that I can use to call attention to certain areas and push the space back and really create some contrast in the piece. I think abstraction sometimes can go hand in hand with minimalism. I really wanted to maintain the white of the page as the lightest color. And if there's any quality of abstraction here in the way that I represented it, it's probably in the fact that I didn't render it very deeply with a lot of different colors and hues. I had no idea how to use this water brush thing, so I didn't use a lot of it at first, and then towards the end I started to figure it out a little bit and understand that I can do a little bit of blending and just make the piece feel a little bit more put together. This was a really peaceful process for me as I discovered how to really use watercolor.
Recording in progress.
Got a marshmallow in my mouth.
I wasn't paying attention.
That's a good way to start a recording.
So we're starting the video with that.
Marshmallows are great.
Yeah, I forgot those were a thing. Let me see them abstract mountains.
Are you ready
I'm ready.
to see some blue watercolor abstract mountains?
I was born ready.
In 3.
Ba-bam!
Ooh, this is cool. Yours is definitely more abstract than mine is.
Really?
Yeah.
One of the things I was struggling with this piece was contrast. It got out of control for me. Like I lost the reins on it. Thinking of like doing the most minimal amount of strokes to get the essence of mountains. That was the intention when I sat down and set up. And that was the complete opposite of the process I fell into. I feel like abstract work should be a little bit quicker, maybe a little bit more gestural, kind of leaning into form, color in the most minimal sense. And that's how I started. I felt like I had to just keep going back in. And then before I knew it, I had all of these shapes and colors and splotches. And I was like, where am I going to take it? And yeah, so as I started layering up and getting the different edges coming in, that's where the motifs of like the repeated lines came out, because I'm like, okay, if I want to take like kind of play off of the repetition of like the forms that are here, maybe I can bring in like a graphical element to kind of lean this more into an abstract realm and get it away from the landscape, because I started to go landscape and I'm like, wait, we're trying to go abstract here. I'm leaning into representation. And so I tried to find ways to like reel myself back, but I kept getting pulled that way.
Yours is really successful in maintaining that balance of both mountains and abstraction. If you look at like a children's art piece, it's attempting to be representational, but it still has a foot in the abstract. Of course, you're going to see representational form. Even if you went fully abstract with this, it would still have representational qualities to it, and people would look at it and see something in it, right? I mean, you can look at an ink blot and people, come up with the craziest ideas of what that is, which, is more like projecting from their inner thoughts. So I think it's almost impossible to avoid representation.
I'm really curious what everyone else thinks. Do you see something other than mountains? Let us know. And I'm gonna get myself excited with another marshmallow. Wow. Okay, it's definitely not abstract, I have to say that, right? But let's not rub the salt in that wound. You have an affinity for capturing light.
Thank you.
For a real first go at watercolor, this is very successful.
And in hindsight, I think I was way too cautious with this and like missed the mark in terms of it being abstract, because I just started with the mountains and was like, all right, how am I actually going to make this look like mountains? And I really just did it the same way I would approach any other art piece, just layering up more layers and getting darker with the space that needed to be darker as I went through
That's
it.
exactly what you do with watercolor. Yeah, you build.
So I was trying to use like washes and see what would happen with it, but I think I definitely held too tight onto the reins and didn't really allow the medium even to use it to its full extent. I think I was a little bit too cautious with it. I did really enjoy this though, and just learning more about the property of it and how you can use watercolor. It's interesting because I'm used to having so much control when using pastels with like blending, where when you're using watercolor, there's an element of like giving up control. And I think this piece kind of reflects that I didn't give up control much with it.
But I think you made a right choice of just leaning into that moment, whether it was within the scope of the challenge or not. And in the end, you got a piece that looks dope. Thanks for watching.
Let us know in the comments what you want to see us create next.